Our next speaker is English speaking. She is a celebrated woman in tech. She's actually been listed as UK's most influential woman in tech. She's written books, or at least one, called Demanding More. And she's also the Group VP of Diversity and Inclusion at Valtech. And she's here to talk about, so we're going to touch on data-driven change again. Data-driven change, embedding inclusion that scales across geographies. Welcome up on stage, Sheree Atcheson.
Cheers, thank you.
From one colorful suit to
yes,
another.
I love it.
Welcome.
And yes, my session's definitely in English because I only speak that and Irish, and I don't think that's useful here today. So hi everybody, I'm Sheree, and I'm super excited to talk to you about creating a global strategy that maps across regions, regardless of what region you are in. So before that, a little bit about me. I guess I'm almost replicating what I'm doing now. I'm Group VP of Diversity and Inclusion at Valtech. I have been doing diversity and inclusion senior leadership for over 10 years. Previously, I was a software engineer. I'm a multi-award winner for my services to diversity and inclusion across the world, listed as one of the UK's most influential women in tech. My debut book last year, Demanding More, Why Diversity and Inclusion Don't Happen, and What You Can Do About It, was listed as one of the Financial Times best books of the summer last year, which was really exciting. I wasn't mentioning it for that reason, but okay. And if you're interested in my work, which is really rooted in using data to unearth privilege, you can read about it at Forbes, where I write regularly, Thomson Reuters, any of those big publications, you'll find me there. So what I really want to talk to you today is about making sure we step outside of our own boxes and biases, every single one of us. It's really, really important when we think about how we create something new, how we do that in a way that isn't just for people that we directly identify with. Now, I've held senior leadership roles at Deloitte, at Monzo Bank, at Pecan, and I'm now at Valtech. And so I've been doing this for hopefully long enough to know how to do it well. So firstly, Valtech. We're a global digital transformation company. We create the solutions of tomorrow today. We work with companies all over the world, and we are obviously based in Sweden. So we're super excited to partner with D-Congress today, and I'm super excited to come here for a visit from the UK. We are local at scale, and what that means is we are in over 50 countries, over 19 countries and 50 offices. We're all over the world, we work with all different people, and what's important about that is the nuance. Think about the nuance of every person in this room, but think of the nuance that you would have with 5,000 people in all different walks of life and regions. And so for us, we're really talking about transforming by doing, stepping up to the mark, putting our money where our mouth is, I guess is the best way to put that, and being the change that we need around diversity and inclusion, sustainability, and all of the other bits and pieces that really make businesses successful. Now, before I talk about what I want you to do, and me to do, because it's my strategy, so if I'm not doing it, it's probably not going too well, I want to talk about why this is important. Now, I'm likely preaching to the converted, but I think it's really important to take stock of why we do this work, why people like me have been doing this for years, why we write about it, why we publish books, why you think it's important. Now, we've already touched on the business benefits, and I think most of you know that, but what I want you to think about is scaling. No business, for the most part, stays the same size as it is right now. No technology solution that is created right now stays the same as it is in this time being. It changes, it evolves, it maps to what people need. Now, nobody wants to talk about the pandemic, I get it, but the last 2 years have really, really shown us how important it is that we listen, we learn, and we pivot, how we work together, how we create solutions, what solutions need creating in the first place. And when we think about diversity and inclusion, firstly, we talk about this. I'm not so fussed about what words we use because actually I think the action is more important. And I think it's really important sometimes that we get caught up in that. But what I want you to think about is the two things separately. Very often we throw the phrase out together, it rolls off the tongue nicely, everybody's used to it. Now, when you think about the technology solutions or the diversity and inclusion strategy you may have in your business or you may not have in your business, how do you create those? Is it a diversity and inclusion strategy or is it a diversity and inclusion strategy? Two very, very separate things when it comes to strategy creation. I think it's really important that we recognize that because actually the initiatives that we should do to rectify, to challenge, to change those things are very, very different. But yet we kind of bung them all in together and hope for the best. Now, what I also want us to recognize is exclusion. Every company that I have joined, and we've just done this at Valtech as well, is we talk about exclusion before we talk about inclusion. So one of the things we've done internally is mandating privilege awareness training for all senior leadership roles. So that's global, regional, director, executive roles and above, because those people make decisions. Now at the start of that session, what we talk about is exclusion on a global scale. Who has access to healthcare? Who doesn't? Who has access to mortgages? Where they live, how you exist in the world and how others don't. And that's what I want you to think about when you create diversity and inclusion strategies. It's very easy to quickly go from this point of something really bad is happening in the world, I want to fix it, without recognizing the history, the decisions that people, maybe like us, have made to bring us to this position already. Now I want to share where we're at Valtech. I joined just last year. It's my year anniversary next week. That's exciting. Maybe someone will give me a pen or a cake. Who knows? Maybe not. Most likely not. But we have some data, and I'll talk about what we're doing in the future because we want more data. The data that we do have at the moment is on hiring. Now, everybody is hiring for the most part. Nobody's really stopped, especially transformation companies, technology companies. Now, what we have seen through the work that we have done around specific hiring, challenging bias in our recruitment process, and training for interviewers, hiring managers, and so on, that we have made a marked increase in the change of women in this case coming in to Valtech. Now, we do know that diversity is much more varied than just gender. From a global perspective, this is the only global data we have at the moment. We are working on how we understand this on a regional basis and reporting on that, but I'm really big fan of transparency. I think it's really important to share what you have right now, even if it isn't the whole picture. Now, like I said, we are in lots and lots of regions. We have people from all over the world working on teams together. We are cross-functional, cross-location. I think almost everybody is now because all of us have access to Zoom or Teams or whatever it might be. So you're working with people everywhere. Now, the same thing is key for our inclusion and diversity strategy. Now, when I joined Valtech, what I wanted to do was firstly understand what we were doing. We were doing lots of wonderful things in all different places, but we didn't connect despite being a company that has a huge, huge footprint. Now that's where we want to globally collaborate. I want you to think right now of the offices maybe you have, and maybe they're all in Sweden, but actually how you collaborate even with those offices as it stands. What's really important in diversity and inclusion is nuance. It's very, very easy for me to, let's say, create a strategy that is very UK focused and say that that maps globally. Now, how would that map to Singapore or some of our Indian offices or Latin America? It simply won't. Now, I want you to think about how you create strategies when you sit in global remits or roles. And that's where the regional and local implementation is really, really important. Because what you're trying to do is create something that is consistent. As everybody talks about diversity and inclusion within the business, it's common, there's common themes, it's easy to understand, but there is nuance embracing the differences that Sweden may have versus Denmark, versus the UK, versus India, versus Argentina, North Macedonia, North American regions, and so on. And that's what we've done at Valtech, and I'm going to tell you as well how we've done it too. So we have 5 pillars, and I guess from my experience, these are the best pillars that I think we should look at. Accountability. Now, I think everybody knows what accountability means. It means I'm going to do this, this is how I'm going to do it, this is not what I'm going to do, and this is why not. For us, that's really, really rooted in transparency. That's why I'm sharing that data that we have with you already, even though it's not the full picture that we want right now. Internally, we provide 6 months updates to all of the company from me. Yes, it's a lot of work. Yes, maybe I would like to not do that every 6 months. And once a month, I put a Teams update as well. But then we've just committed this year to sharing our first ever external diversity and inclusion report, the full picture. Now, we've already put our strategy out there. It's on our website with that data that I mentioned. But we'll share all of the rest. Now, the reason for that is, one, our Valtechies will hold us to account. But we also want people like you to hold us to account as well. This is what we say we're going to do. This is how we're going to do it. If we don't make it, we will also tell you that as well. Education. I think one of my favorite things in any D&I strategy, and certainly from doing this work for a really long time, is education. Because it's so easy to assume that, oh, you know this, so that means you know this, and that means you know this. But actually, assumptions are riddled with bias. We cannot make an assumption that person X knows something just because person Y knows it. Now think about this from a global context. How can I be sure that, let's say, leader X is really aware of equity, on creating equitable processes, understanding privilege in the context of decision making, and assume that just because another person is the same level, they would know that? They won't know that. I can't make that assumption. That's why education is really important for us. Now, we have mandated a leadership learning path for those groups of people, and we've also created the training materials to empower all of our local regions to roll out in a way that makes sense to them. I think it's really important to start with decision makers because they're decision makers. They decide the strategy, they decide the vision, they decide where we're trying to go and how we're trying to get there, but also who we bring along the way. Community. Now, one of the best things about the work that Valtech was already doing before I came along was our Tech Girl initiative, which was founded in Sweden, which you may be aware of already. And it's here to bring together local role models in all of our different regions, go out to schools and inspire the next generation of women in tech. Now, it's more than just inspiration. It's training. They provide education on actually how do you start to code, how do you delve into those kinds of careers and so on. And that initiative has been going for quite a few years. And now we really want to level it up. So we now work to run sort of globally at least one event in every one of our 50 offices. Community is important because it's about bringing people together. It's about helping people see things either with like-minded people or people you maybe have no direct connection to. I think that's such an important point when you think of strategy creation, is how do you create the connections between those that are represented in various different roles and those that are not? How do you fill that experience gap through lines of community, coming together, a like-mindedness, but also a strategy like this that brings people together? Inclusivity is kind of, I guess, it is what it says on the tin. It's about making sure that the people we have in the business is and are feeling a sense of belonging. They feel that they can succeed and reach their goals, whatever they might be. But it must be very, very nuanced. Now, a really good example of this is our new Accelerating into Leadership program we rolled out October-ish last year. And we have a blog on this as well if you want to delve into it more. But ultimately, when I joined, I looked at all of the data with all of our 19 managing directors. Yes, that was a lot of calls. No, I don't recommend it. But what we found was that when I analysed with our people and culture leads, what does underrepresented mean per region that we're in? Sweden, Denmark, UK, Argentina, wherever else it might be. What does underrepresented mean for that country? What does it mean for Valtech? And when we take that lens, what is the data showing us for people within the ranks? Now, for the most part, what we did find was that when it came to underrepresentation, a lot of our regions had a pipeline issue. People were not moving up the ranks. Now, one way to really challenge that is the education that I've mentioned before, and the stopgaps or the things we're putting around it for when leaders aren't making the right choices, but also ensuring sponsorship of underrepresented people is there, directly assigning them and pairing them with a senior leader in the same vertical, providing them a very clear framework that is consistent for every region that's on the pilot, supporting that relationship for 12 years and seeing how it goes. So we've got to the 3-month mark. We've seen that out of the, I think it's 39 proteges, 9 have got promoted already, which is really promising. And we've also seen a huge increase in how those proteges have rated their confidence, their desire to stay at Valtech, and the growth opportunities they believe they can now access. So it's really about understanding the nuance. We wouldn't just roll this out and, for example, do a program that was for, let's say, women and people of color. Well, now, would that make sense in India? Of course it's not going to make sense in India because all of our employees in India are people of color. So why would that even be a conversation? Yet somehow, this keeps happening over and over again. And then lastly, hiring. I've touched on the hiring data that we have, people coming into the business. How do we ensure that it's fair, that it's consistent, and that it's, equal as well? Now, we've shared all of this online on our website if you want to delve into it more, and we will have our strategy report coming out at the end of the year. But I want to talk about 4 things that I think you could do, if you want to. Hopefully you do, to create a diversity and inclusion strategy that maps across regions regardless of where you're at. Now, the first thing is friction before decision making. Now, I want you to think about how you make decisions right now. Now, many of us make them like that, and that's how our brains are worked. Our brains are created and make decisions based on assumptions, previous experiences, and what potentially pressure around us is telling us to do. That can also cause a lot of issues when it comes to creating strategies. Now, it maybe seems harmless, but actually when we think about where leadership teams are based, let's say the majority of your global company, your leadership team is based in EMEA. That's like us at Valtech. A lot of our leadership team are based in EMEA, but we're in 19 plus countries. Now, how do we make sure that the decisions we make don't just translate for this bubble around us, but actually this huge place? And the only way to do that is to put friction into the process, to stop people before they give a yes or a no. When people ask me, what my job is, I always say at the most basic level, it's putting friction into decision making. It's stopping people before they make the decision. I think when we think of affinity bias, people that we're drawn to because they're similar to us, or recency bias because, let's say, I've talked to you 5 minutes before I've talked to you, and so you seem way more exciting, but that's just because I remember you. It's really important to think about how that shapes our decision making. But I also really want us to think about the media and the influence that has when it comes to decision making as well, especially in a business context. This might seem like common sense. Of course it is, seeking perspectives that are not represented in the room, but I want you to think about how you do that right now. Echo chambers are very, very dangerous because they give us a false sense of security. They give us this frictionless journey from A to Z, and then somehow we think we've all came to this conclusion, so it's the right one. But we've never had someone jutting in or providing different perspectives. We've never had someone pushing back and saying, actually, no. We should go back to the start. I was an engineer for many, many years. I worked on high-profile public sector projects in the UK. None of you, I don't think, will have registered to vote online in the UK, but if you have, you would have used the code that I would have written as well. And when we think about how we create solutions like that, you do not roll out technology solutions, or you shouldn't. actually. Many people do. You shouldn't roll out technology solutions without thinking of all of the perspectives and different insights that we need. But yet, when we create diversity and inclusion strategies, we do that all the time because we assume intention over impact. The intention is good. Okay, I want to do this. This sounds good. This is what I need to do. But the impact is not so good. And it's very similar to what we just heard in the last session. You know, we create solutions that maybe prioritize heterosexual, non-disabled white women, and other people are left behind. I want you to think about the people that are forgotten about, the continuing to be excluded, disabled people, people from different ethnicities and nationalities, all of the different people that maybe you don't directly identify with. But does that mean that we don't seek those perspectives before we make those decisions? Now, a really important point on this is to remember that actually those people may not be in your rooms right now. Okay, what organizations can you partner with to make sure that you still get those perspectives? So I sit on a number of boards. One of them is Women Who Code, which is the world's largest non-profit globally dedicated to women in tech. I led their UK expansion and part of their May expansion, and they've been going for, 7 or 8 years now, and we have over 300,000 global members. What we get a lot of people partnering us with is to get those perspectives that they don't have in their room right now. Whilst they work on their hiring, etc., they need to tap into the knowledge of people that aren't there right now as well. I want us to embrace culture from all regions. You know, Sweden has its own culture, and across different cities, different things are important. One of the regions I worked a lot in with Deloitte was the Nordics, and especially in Oslo and in Bergen. And whilst, all in the one region, very, very different, with very, very different issues when it comes to diversity and inclusion. That's embracing the culture to understand those, understand how those things work, when they work, why they work, and creating something that answers to it. Now, what I want you to remember is that there are cultures that are very, very different to yours. Very, very different. What I want you to do is to listen and learn. We don't have to understand everything to respect it. And it's important when we think about how we create new strategies, how we embrace those different important pieces in all of the regions and create something that comes together. And then finally, I want you to be very, very clear on what you're doing, whether that's your strategy and the data that is underpinning that as well. What I think is important here is data is so important, and if you read any of my pieces, you'll see that data is kind of a common thread through all of it. But what's key here is recognizing, one, how do we get that data? What can you do with the legal perspective and all of that fun stuff? Do not forget about that fun stuff, because I've joined other businesses where they have forgotten about that, and it's not been fun to try and fix. But be very clear on what you're trying to fix. One of the things we've rolled out internally is a new engagement platform, so we can really understand how people feel from all of our different regions on belonging, management, support, reward, and so on. It's called Peakon. That's where I was at before Valtech as well. And what we're doing now is defining the goals off of that. When we break it down by gender, gender and leadership, gender, ethnicity and leadership, if we have that data for certain regions and so on. But we're very, very specific about what we're trying to change. Because if you think back to that wheel, the accountability piece is all about using data to be very, very clear on what we want, on globally collaborating, and regionally and locally implementing. Now, before I wrap up, and I know we have a break and everything, I'll be outside if anybody wants to talk before I have to run to get a flight that hopefully isn't cancelled for the 3rd time. But I want you to really spend some time thinking about what is it that's important to you, and how do you make sure you do not only create something that benefits people like you, because already we live in a world that both greatly advantages some and disadvantages others in the same breath. Thank you.